Welcome back to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schuknecht, and today's guest is Janet Polach, author of The Strategic Leader's Mindset, Unlocking the Keys to Success. Janet, welcome. First of all, if anyone was watching, I smiled at you as I said your name because we had a brief conversation about your name being Pollock like the fish.
Yep.
And as soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, did I say that right? I did. Pollock like the fish. My son loves to fish, so I'm very familiar with Pollock. So Janet, let's start with your book. I'd love for you to start out by telling me why you wrote this, and I'm really excited to just talk about your book and the message behind it because I love talking about leadership. So tell me about what led you to write this book in the first place.
Sure. So leadership also is my passion. It's what I do. It's my life's work. I gained my understanding of what is leadership and how do you develop in the United States Marine Corps. I'm a retired lieutenant colonel. And I learned that you actually can develop leadership. And so I have been doing that for, the last 20, 25 years. During COVID, I wrote my first book, The 7 Mistakes New Managers Make, which is just the blocking and tackling of being a good people manager. And then when I got it done, people said, well, what's next? And I thought, that's it. That was hard, and I got it done. And so there you go. But then over about 2 years, it kind of came to me as I was working with executive leaders that, they get so caught up still in the day-to-day activity of, just 1 minute boss. They're in back-to-back meetings. Meetings now are all 30 minutes, and so there's twice as many. They just don't have an opportunity to pause at all and really think about the long term, think about the possibilities and so forth. And so from academic research, from my own experience coaching executives and seeing lots and lots of 360s, I uncovered these 7 different mindsets. So at the strategic level, it's really not about a set of competencies, do this, then this, then this, and this. It's really about how do you think differently. And so that's been my work for the last few years, is helping to leaders figure out how to be at and stay at and be in the strategic moment, because of course the leaders at the top of our organization, that's what we pay them to do, not necessarily to solve somebody's distribution problem in the immediate. We have people that do that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So I feel like as a leader myself, I've built marketing teams. I'm on kind of my third iteration of that as I started my own company and I'm growing my team now. But I'm a master delegator. So I can be super busy, but also I'm like, I do not want to be in the work every day. I'm like, I need other people to do the work so I can do other things.
Yep.
So to me, that's like just almost like a natural, but I am working with a client right now where I'm seeing that often where the leaders in the company are just struggling to get anything done because they're just, it's back-to-back meetings, like you said, it's back-to-back meetings, and it's just in the work all the time.
Yep.
And then they can't see the bigger picture. They can't figure out how to solve some of the problems that are coming up. And I'm removed from it. So I get to see what's going on and go, you guys need to fix this. You need to look at this. You need to, easier said than done, right? But how do you get out of, or how do you coach people around getting out of that? Like, how do you get out of back-to-back meetings? Because you get pulled into meetings, you get pulled into things. Like, how do you coach people to get out of that kind of mindset? I mean, it kind of is a mindset.
It is a mindset.
And to be almost more strategic with your time, to allow yourself to have that time to think about those things.
Yeah. Well, one of the very first questions I ask a senior leader when I'm working with them is, do you have a strategic plan? And is it referred to? Taking time, it takes, several days to write a strategic plan, and you come up with good stuff. And then so many companies, it just goes on a shelf and then we update it next year in 2 years. And so I find that executive teams then lose sight of what were their big rocks for the year or the years to come. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing, and the best advice I have to start kind of in a strategic mindset, is to actually block your calendar. You always have to do this 2 or 3 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time, because you're not going to find any time next week already.
Right.
It's midweek when we're talking. And I think the magic number is 90 minutes.
Okay.
30 minutes doesn't allow the brain to shift enough and move off that kind of day-to-day or worrisome things that are on your list. Anything more than 90 minutes, I think, feels like it can be doldrums, or it can be people are like, well, where's the boss? I need to talk to him. So I find that there's kind of a magic number in there about 90 minutes that, and this 90 minutes isn't about, putting your feet up on the desk and saying, what will I think about today? It's really setting an intention and a focus for that strategic time.
Okay.
So it can be a doing activity of creating, the baseline presentation to talk about a new idea. It could be thinking about your own team and is everybody in the right seat? And what would happen if I added another person, and what would that role look like? So it's very intentional. Of course, the ideal, when you get into this, is to do it twice a week so that you actually find time to advance it on. But our brain is not able to do that automatic switch. So a lot of times with executive teams, they're like, okay, we talked about these 4 things. We got to fire the head of HR. We've got so many vacancies in sales, all that kind of stuff, which is all operational stuff. And they say, okay, now let's return to our strategic plan. And the brain is just not capable of that fast switching and do quality work in either domain. So setting aside strategic time as a senior team, for example, if you meet, say, 2 hours every single week, maybe the last 2 hours of the month is always on strategic. So yeah, there are operational things a senior team gets involved in, but if you let them, I worked with one executive, they were in medical device team, and their meetings just got longer and longer and longer and longer every single week. They had, I think, 13 people on their senior team, and so they just were doing the work of directors. Is what it boiled down to. So they did a couple of things. First of all, they reorganized themselves and had only 3 or 4 executives that worked on operations stuff, and then 3 or 4 that worked on HR and policy stuff, and 3 or 4 that worked on sales. And so when they came together, they really pinpointed the problem solving rather than what's the update about our hiring profile.
Mm-hmm. Now, okay, so 90 minutes twice a week is what you recommend.
Mm-hmm.
And blocking that time on your calendar and having specific things you're focused on. Now, how do you, and sorry if I missed this, but how do you determine what those things, like, so are you planning out that 90 minutes, like, next week during that 90-minute block, I'm going to focus on this one thing? Or do you kind of have like a running list? Like, how do you organize that?
I think for each block to have a specific focus. For example, maybe it's next year's staffing plan. Am I going to add roles? Am I going to remove roles? What are my pressing needs? To try to do multiple topics in a 90-minute meeting kind of gets you back into that same rut of I'm just problem solving. So I think it has to be, what's on that list that never quite gets crossed off, because it's hard and it's forward looking and it takes some imagination. So, letting yourself wander. I put on music often if I have to really go into a strategic orientation to get me either really excited about doing it or calming my mind. I think starting with some deep breathing exercises for just a couple of minutes to help yourself get calm, regrouped, and then spend that time in real work of an executive. When I propose this, they say, oh, my company will never let me get away with that. Well, then you're maybe at the wrong place. Or, I don't know if I can do 90 minutes. We'll start with an hour. And you'll discover after a couple of times doing it for an hour that you need more time. And so grab that time early, 2 or 3 weeks from now, block it off. Even in the subject line, say something like, do not schedule over, right? Work with your executive admin to make sure that is sacred space. And so making it happen by doing what you're doing, Kelly, so well, delegating, so that you're not working in the business day to day, but you're working on the business.
Now, do you use EOS or there's another one I can't think of, but do you use anything like that with executive teams? And I'm forgetting what EOS is. No, what is it? Executive Operating System? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
EOS is kind of a way of life. I'm not certified in it, and I know a number of practitioners, because you really build up this whole system. And I think EOS is probably the closest model to understanding really what strategic thinking is. You put those big rocks in, and then every week you remind yourselves what the big rocks are, and you report against each of those. Each person reports against those big rocks. And so these really important new ideas, new markets get attention every single week. And we've all met organizations that want to go there, but they don't. And so EOS is a great tool to start with. I don't use it in my strategic plan. I just use facilitation. Sometimes I use a capability model. So there's capability models of a business, and we kind of screen, how are you at marketing? How are you at IT? How are you at these various components? And that's also a good way to say, oh my gosh, here's where we're at, here's where we should be, which is a really wonderful conversation in doing strategic plan. Like, you don't have to be a 10 at everything on a capability model. Maybe, having solid HR processes, your small business, you don't have a lot of money to invest in additional systems, but you get the work done, people get paid on time, there's some career development happening. So a 5 might be just fine. The 10s have to happen in market development and product orientation and supply chain efficiencies, and then assessing where are we today, and then where would we really like to be in a year or 2 years.
So I'm not familiar with the capabilities model, but I have heard that actually a lot recently. I don't know if that's a newer thing or if I just wasn't.
Well, for a long time you had to buy a capability model. So if you were in distribution, for example, and they were several $100s. So it was a pretty big investment. But of course, because now of AI and chat, we can type in distribution capability model, give me 3 of them. And if you overlay them, they'll be very, very similar. And what they look like is kind of the top functions or capabilities are across the top, and then the detailed, they're really a high-level process map. What are the processes in our organization? And so if you think about finance, it's receivables, it's payables is another group, it's vendor relationship is probably another one underneath there. And so I would, if that part intrigues you, I would just say, find a good chat GPT that you like and ask for 3 or 4.
Yeah. So, but am I understanding it right that it's kind of like taking your leadership team and helping people identify, like, I'm good at this, you're good at that, like, here's how we can pair up to be the most effective. Is that kind of like how it's used?
Kelly, before you even get there, you have to assess the capabilities on the model. So accounts payable, how important is it to us? And B, how good are we at it on a 5-point scale, 10-point scale? And so you go through all of that first. Then you ask yourselves, what do we need to do? Accounts payable, for example, we generally don't receive anything for 90 days. Like, is that a way to run a business? Oh, we need to go from a 2 to a 4, right? And so you go very meticulously through each element of a capability model and then say, now, how do we fix these? How do we address these? Is it new systems? Is it what you just mentioned? Is it better partnering between sales and, and billing? What are the solutions? And then that forms the foundation of your strategic plan.
Okay, got it. So that's interesting. I need to learn more about that one. So you're working with the team, you're helping them figure out kind of how to block their time, how to focus on, even though you don't use EOS, you use like kind of the rocks structure of like having certain things at every 90 days. Are you doing the 90-day kind of check-in on the rocks? and helping them work towards these. So in my previous company, we did use EOS. Kind of. I don't know how well we used it, but we did do that structure where it was like we had these quarterly meetings. We had rocks that were determined, and then, we'd come back the next quarter, report on what had been completed, what wasn't, whatever. But really, it's amazing when you're using something like that. In the moment, it doesn't feel like a lot is happening, but in in 6 months, in a year, you really start to notice this progress that's happening where it's like, wow, you can look back and see how much stuff has changed because of kind of setting some goals and having some accountability around that. So that's great. Oh, go ahead.
Let me just add to that, because I think the other reason that a system like that works is because you do have to report in. So if you're spending all your time in operations and a month goes by and you haven't made any progress, and then 2 months go by, let's face it, executives are competitive with each other, regardless if they're in different functions. We all want to win for the business, but we always want to look good. That's just human nature. And so if you're going along and not having successes or focus or developments in your assigned rocks, your colleagues will know. And so it's a good way to keep track of what's happening. Stuff falls behind, but then we have something to talk about. What can we do with this one that's falling behind? Is it a short people issue? Is it a talent quality issue? Is it, this one is just too impossible to solve right now? But I think it's a way to keep your strategic initiatives very much top of mind.
Yeah. So what are some other things that so I mentioned kind of the getting in the cycle of being so busy and not having time to do things, but what are some of the other things that you have seen that comes up with executive teams and some of the issues that come up for them?
Yeah. Well, some of these mindsets that I talk about in the book, one of them is listening more than talking. Most executives, especially when they're running a function, they go to a meeting and, they do all the talking and a few people listen, and then they say, well, what do you guys think? And what is everybody going to say? Oh, boss, that's just fine. The goal as an executive, I believe, is to talk about 30% of the time and listen about 70% of the time. And, you don't necessarily jump to that immediately, but to get into that mindset of, my time with this team is much more valuable by hearing from them rather than me telling what I think. And so I think that's a good way to kind of shift this way into your strategic mindset. I think being aggressive about subpar performance, your reputation does follow you with subpar performance. Everybody knows when someone isn't pulling their weight. And what happens when a new leader is into a role, they're like, oh, I alone I'll get it fixed this time. I worked with a financial services organization, and they had this one employee that they hired from the outside. 2 months into her hire, the executive who hired her said, I think I made a mistake. He worked on it for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Then he was promoted to a different role. His backfill filled in and said, I think I can do it. The guy had a different style. 4, 5, 6 months. Then there was a big reorganization. Another executive got her as part of her department and had exactly the same challenges. And he finally exited her. And I said to him, I've been talking about this individual for 2 years with you guys. Unless you want to talk about how do you exit this individual, we're not going to have a conversation about this individual. You guys are stuck as an organization, and everybody knew it.
Yeah.
And of course, once he took action, the third leader, he said, boy, I wish I would have done this earlier.
Yeah. I've been in situations like that where it's like everyone can see what the problem is, but what is it? We just don't we don't want to do hard things. We don't want to have to fire somebody or to have hard conversations. And so we let things go on and on and on. And the problem with that is it affects so many people in the meantime. And it's better to make that decision swiftly. It's just hard to do. I
Yeah.
understand that, but I've also been in the situation many times where it's like you just got to do it,
Yeah.
and the organization is better in the end for that.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the leader after leader coming in and wanting to solve the problem, I had a question. Now it kind of changed when you said, kind of what the actual problem, what there was, but like, my thought process when you were saying that is like, I've been that person too. Like I've come into a new role with a client where I'm like, oh yeah, I could fix this. I know how to lead people. I could,
Yeah.
and then you get down the road and you're like, oh my gosh, like this is not just a quick fix. Like there
Yeah.
is something deeper going on here. And so you gave the example of like, there was a person that was a problem.
Yep.
What about when it's like more of a cultural systemic problem, like when there's something going on but nobody can quite put their finger on it, like how do you get to the heart of problems
Yeah.
like that and help the organization turn that culture around?
Yeah. I I think that's when a consultant comes in. You're in the middle of it. You're enmeshing of it. I think the idea of us having to lay people off, it's our own personal humanity. We know that person, they have a mortgage to pay, they have children to feed, all those kind of things. We want to give them one more chance. But I think when you're struggling with, so what's the real problem here? Often when I work with a senior team or maybe an operational team, I start with interviewing everybody. What works well about this team? What gets in the way of this team? If you could change one thing, what would it be? Now, certainly an HR person could do this role very, very well. Or if you have a transformation center in your business, there's probably an analyst that can do that as well. And then what I do is I summarize that and I bring it right back to the group. And I say, this is what you said. And inevitably what happens is, point number 3, somebody will say, I didn't say that, but boy, that's true here. And so then we talk about, so what do we want to take on? First of all, we say, what does better look like? And, somebody by that point is pretty authentic and says, I want to just not hate coming to work every day.
Yeah.
And
right.
be careful about what I say. Like that's a good goal. And that's all about culture.
Yeah.
And so getting the team, to kind of name where they have energy to work, I think is really is important. And I think it's, half the job.
Yeah. And I would imagine that kind of thing, it's not something that you just change one thing and it fixes everything. It's one of those things that it's like, identify one thing that this next quarter we can work on, and that's our rock. And then what's the next thing? And then it's the over time that things start to turn around and get better for people. It's just not going to be an overnight change, overnight fix. It's funny that you said that, because I recommended to a client a workshop like that, where it was like, I know that like, if I worked with different groups, different teams within this organization and did this type of workshop, I guarantee you're going to see themes in what people are saying to identify the problem.
Yep.
And then that will help us recognize like what we need to work on. Right. But yeah, without spending time on it, like it's just, it's kind of, you come to work and it's like, I'm complaining about this person. I'm so busy. I can't do this. All these things are going on. And really it's like, they need to learn how to work better together, and they just need to be able to communicate. And, I say those are hard things to work through with an organization, especially when things have been going on so long that the problems just become big and it's hard to tackle. So yeah, it sounds like the coaching, the consulting that you provide helps people get their organization to a better place, whether it's individual executives or, a bigger kind of organizational problem that nobody can identify what that is exactly. Like you can come in and kind of help them work through those things.
Yeah.
I want to just briefly mention, you have another book, you mentioned it earlier, The 7 Mistakes New Managers Make. That was your first book. Can you talk about that just a little bit? Just how you use that with managers, with executives, to help them learn how to, is it kind of a coaching around managers or more executive level?
It's, people ask me about seven mistakes, and most managers, if they were being honest, would admit in my first 2 years, I made 152 mistakes. but who wants to read that book? So, I highlighted kind of the critical ones because in America and across the world, we promote really great individual contributors to managers. If you draw a Venn diagram in terms of skills, there's really only about a 30% overlap of what we expect from a great individual contributor and what we expect from a manager. So the 7 mistakes is all about basic people management, setting expectations, doing a team assessment, setting clear one-on-one expectations, figure out a way to manage and drive results and measure them so that it's the front of mind, just like we were talking about before. They may not be strategic objectives, but they're the objectives that the organization really wants from that team that year. So keeping them front of mind helps get through all the noise of other possibilities. I wrote it during COVID. I guess like everybody did because I had some time. And I was surprised because I was able to look at my multiple podcasts and all of the content that I developed for workshops over the years. And it all just really fell in place. And then after that, I created a 3-module workshop for organizations, both large and small. And it's really interesting when, there's always the question about who goes. And there's a lot to be said for starting at the top and going down. And oftentimes I'll do a brief of what the content is with the executive team, but then everybody else comes. And what I hear from highly experienced leaders is, I forgot some of this stuff. I don't do this anymore. Quality one-on-ones. We talk about how to have a deep quality employee-led one-on-one rather than what have you done for me today, which is what most one-on-ones are about. And they just have forgotten, what they used to know how to do well. And so I think a refresher program like that, even for experienced leaders, is very, very helpful.
Yeah, that's great. So it sounds like you work with fairly large companies, but I'm curious what your what your advice would be around, I have a new company, within the first year. When do you start to think about these things? When do you start to think about being a strategic leader or having the strategic mindset around leadership and having those rocks? I mean, my leadership team I have a leadership team kind of, but we're still pretty small. So when do you start to implement these things within your organization?
Oh, what a great question. So the smaller the organization, the less they think about that because, it's hard to do by yourself, but not impossible. So with your team, Kelly, for example, you could start a book club or an article club, or you get everybody together on a Tuesday afternoon and watch one of the most fabulous TED Talks that are out there about leadership and, kind of getting bigger picture things done. And so it is easy to start that way. So that's the kind of basic level. And I think you start with it, just as soon as you can take a breath. So leadership development is not the first thing that most people think about. When I've worked one-on-one for a very senior executive, even in a mid-sized company, I know that our work is not her number one priority, but my job is to make sure it stays on the top 5 list. Because if she doesn't spend some time every week on that, she's not going to advance any further in her own confidence or her own brand. And so I think, taking a few hours with your team to say, okay, the year's going okay. What about next year? What else would make us grow from X to Y? And then really having a really critical conversation about, okay, those are great. Now what can we really bite off with who we have at our current revenue level?
Yeah. And you don't want to let it go on too long because then you get to a point where now all of a sudden there's these underlying issues that you weren't on top of as you're growing. But I love the comment that you made about as soon as you're able to take a breath, because I feel like I'm in that space of I can't breathe right now, but we'll get there. We're just going a mile a minute as we're growing, and it's great. I mean, it's a great problem to have, but also you're going to develop other problems if you don't prioritize like equipping the leaders on the team and helping them develop those skills that they need. So, well, this has been wonderful for me, Janet, selfishly, because again, I love talking about leadership, and especially now as I'm growing my business, it's just, obviously top of mind for me. I will link to the Strategic Leaders Mindset in the show notes, but what other ways can people reach you online, find out more about you, connect with you in terms of as it relates to your leadership consulting?
Great, thank you. I have one more question for you before we wrap up.
Sure.
So I'm on LinkedIn, Janet Polach, and my website is simply janetpolach.com. Just make sure you get the spelling right, Polach, not like the fish. And I would be happy to have just a short conversation to introduce myself and some of the capabilities, but more importantly, really hear about where your organization is at and where they might be getting stuck.
Great. We will include those links in the show notes. And you said you had one more question for me?
So my best coaching question at the end is, so what was your one takeaway from our conversation today?
Well, probably not just one. I feel like there was several things that you said that I was like, oh, like okay, so for one, the 7 mistakes new managers make, that book, as you were talking about it, I was thinking, I think I want to buy a copy of that for the new managers on my team. So I have a team of 4 full-time employees, 7 part-time employees as of right now, and some of those part-time folks are going to grow into full-time people, but the book itself, I think there's just things, they're new, right? So like I think that would be a useful resource for them. The other thing, I mean, the time blocking, I'm already like, I am a delegator and a time blocker. Those two things I'm on top of, but my weeks get away from me. Like I will look at next week and go, holy cow, I don't have 30 minutes to like grab something to eat. Like most of my week is back-to-back meetings, or I block time for like specific things I need to get done, but it's like there is no other room. So, I think I need to go through and just make sure, I mean, I'm thinking about my business all the time, so it's not like I don't do it, like it's not like I'm not strategic about things, but it just, things get away from you if you're not making the time for it. So that is something I want to make sure that I'm putting that on my calendar. And then also the thing that you mentioned about, the book club or whatever with my team. My team is remote, so we're all over the world, really. I have people in different countries. And I want to make sure that I am pouring into them as leaders. So not just like buying a copy of the book, but like also making sure that we're doing things together, learning together. I am a constant learner. Like I love reading. I love watching videos, learning new things, and I want to instill that in my team members as well. So that was the other thing. Great. So those are 3 top of mind. I'm sure there were some other things, Janet, that I will.
Good to hear.
yeah. So thank you. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your 2 books with us, and just some of those tips. They were fantastic for leadership. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much.
Looking for a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey? Join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyschuknecht.com.